Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here, and welcome to another eMarketer Tech Talk, where we host guests from across ad tech, martech, and media. I'm Emmy Lederman. I'm an analyst at eMarketer, and today my guest from PartnerCentric will talk through how smart brands are rewriting their affiliate strategies. Joining me in eMarketer's New York City studio is Tom Rathbone, Vice President of Product, Data, and Insights at PartnerCentric. Hi, Tom.
Hi, Emmy. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. Tom and I have a conversation planned for you, but first, he'll share how marketers can invest in affiliate partners that drive value. Then I'll follow up with some questions on my mind, and afterwards, we'll open it up for Q&A. So you can use the chat window to submit questions for the Q&A and to communicate with other audience members. So with that, Tom, over to you.
Cool. Thank you. Yeah, PartnerCentric is one of the oldest agencies in the affiliate and influencer marketing space. We work with some of the world's best brands, but consistently we see a lot of the same stories play out even amongst those brands. And if we wanted to simplify that, we could basically boil it down to the fact that performance marketing doesn't always tell the truth, and it isn't always performance as much as we'd like it to be. Why this happens, there's a lot of reasons, but more often than not, we still see last click attribution dominating, which is only going to reward a single interaction, certainly not the most impactful one, and it leaves the door open to what we often call last click mousetraps. Essentially, companies that will optimize to try and capture a credit and capture that last click without necessarily aiming to provide value to the customer or the brand in question. We can certainly see more of the browser extension controversies over the last year as credence to that. So in a real world example, many consumers will interact with great influencer content, great ads, do a little bit of research, and then when they're ready to close out, they will click on a coupon ad that may or may not even provide a valid coupon. And that's not really going to be providing value to that customer or that brand. So essentially, too many brands are paying partners that take credit, but not necessarily partners that are creating value. For us, this pretty big disconnect has led to building a better lens where we're trying to find a way to uncover the story there. Because more often than not, the true value is hidden behind the wrong metrics. A lot of this we call the bleed, or have been recently. And it's tricky because often this misattribution is treated as a painful thing or an inconvenience where you see a misalignment in value and misalignment in metrics. But that's a very significant amount of dollars. So our own data from our own products shows that we'll see up to a 30 to 40% misattribution rate. And that's very real marketing budget dollars that are being allocated towards partners that probably aren't providing as much value. So brands end up over investing in low funnel partners who are intercepting conversions that are already in motion and aren't able to invest in the higher value partnerships, which is not great. We also see partners like carding to offer partners, some browser extension partners, some remarketing, retargeting partners operating behind closed doors, measuring their own homework with limited visibility and misleading results so that brands are wary of testing with them. And these are impediments to smart growth in the affiliate channel. It's pretty simple why it happens. Most of the affiliate platforms that brands are working with are operating in a way where they're viewing a very limited amount of the traffic. They just see affiliate traffic, they just see affiliate clicks. They are not really going to be tracking all the other channels and looking at the whole picture. And it leads to a situation or an incentive to just optimize towards that very last click. So the influencers or other content providers that may be occurring before the affiliates came into play are just blind to, are not very, the performance isn't clear to the brands that are working within the affiliate channel. So it leads to, again, that last click mousetrap that we've been talking about. So case in point, we'll bring this up a lot because I think it's a major problem that in our own incrementality technology, we'll see these kind of top performing toolbar extensions with really great numbers on their surface, providing a lot of performance on the surface. But when you look at some data that has kind of a different perspective and has a broader perspective, we'll see that they're just kind of capitalizing on existing demand or harvesting demand. And they're not really creating that new demand that's going to drive growth for brands in this space. And this results in an overstated ROAS and underperforming spend. If your ROAS is going to be based on the affiliate network data, the numerator in that question is already overstated. Um, and so you're going to see that your ROAS from one perspective is maybe really high for certain partners. And when you use incrementality products or better attribution technology, that number is going to be vastly different. And it's going to create a lot of distrust. It's going to create a lot of conflict. And ultimately, it demonstrates how a lot of that spend is misallocated. So we kind of look at this, we see the brand value as kind of your classic pyramid where as a brand, you're going to value your content partners, your influencers, you're going to value your review sites that are helping consumers kind of figure out if this product's for them. And then you're not so much going to value those coupons and sometimes the loyalty partners that kind of help those conversions get over the line, which is valuable, but maybe not so much as the influencers that drove that initial demand in the first place. But if you look at what's kind of tracked in the space, what's measured, and what is determined to be performant, it's the inverse. The content, the review are depositioned, they're deprioritized, and the coupon publishers, the lower funnel actors, the last click mousetraps, are overperforming based on relative to what the brands value. Um, so the sophisticated marketers that are going to be asking the question, like, who's meaningfully contributing to that outcome and how are they doing it? Um, we've seen this in the field play out a bunch of different ways. We can look to when we bring on certain brands that have been in the space for a long time, they may have the perception that based on the mix of the publishers that they're working with, that it's well balanced, that it's well optimized, and they have a lot of different publishers and a lot of different touch points and value throughout value being provided through the channel. But when you actually find some data and utilize data in a more sophisticated way, you will see that they're still over investing at the bottom. So while those partners may be part of the mix and maybe providing some traffic and driving some demand, they're still not being compensated relative to the value and the demand that they're driving. And the publishers that are able to be more easily tracked or credited, those are the ones that are claiming a lot of that credit. And we'll see this. We had even recently like a really big hybrid campaign with a pretty major influencer. And we also had a scale deal platform in the mix at the same time. And when you look at the tracking between the two, it's a pretty stark contrast. That top funnel creator, that influencer is driving a ton of awareness, really great engagement, driving demand. But then when you look at the traditional reporting on a last click basis, they're absent, they're overlooked. So in that case, we were fortunate to have the technology and the perspective and the data to redistribute that budget towards that undervalued top of funnel influencer. And when that's done, you end up with more consistent, more reliable, more stable revenue, far greater efficiency for your marketing spend, and a big drop in your customer acquisition costs. So we have reallocated those dollars towards the demand, invested in the demand, and for those publishers that are just kind of helping the customers get over the line, valuable, but they should be paid commensurate with that value that they're providing. Um, when we look at this, we kind of compare attribution towards actual lift. And more often than not, unfortunately, they don't do the same thing. In a perfect world, attribution and actual lift would be pretty comparable, and you would be attributing value to where the lift is happening. Um, and we'll see the brands come in the space where they are working with all these partners. They have a performance-based relationship with a large partner that's lower in the funnel, and the returns on paper are really strong. But when you actually look at the session data, what's driving traffic to the site, that brand is absent from that data set, or that publisher is absent from that data set, which to us means that the data is clearly showing that that publisher is capturing a lot of credit. It's inserting it themselves into a lot of conversions that were already happening, but they're not actually driving, not initiating that demand in the first place. We had a financial content brand recently that kind of sidestepped that in a really smart way. They started co-creating content with these high trust publishers, trying to ensure that that message is reaching audience before, like earlier, to form that intent, and make sure we're kind of quantifying value based on that. When we adjust the compensation structures to match that true contribution, we're able to redirect those savings towards partners driving the real engagement earlier in the journey. And that is then kind of aligning your cost towards actual lift and not aligning your cost towards an attribution model. That attribution model being last click. We can also see this with top converters, where maybe they're retargeting partners, or like a remarketing partner. Maybe they're tracking, maybe they have their own tags on site, and they are kind of crediting a lot of revenue to themselves. But when we actually look at the lift, again, no net new revenue, no net new value. But we'll see the smaller partners that are sparking interest being overlooked, being overshadowed by this publisher that's very, very good at claiming credit. We had a subscription-based brand recently, and they're facing challenges where they're tracking non-code-based referrals, which very often code-based referrals are kind of a workaround to try and assign credit. It's not great, but it can be helpful for certain models or certain influencers. If we're able to kind of not rely on that entirely, because codes get out, codes get leaked, we want to kind of enable more creative tracking with publishers and niche influencers. We're able to discover much, much higher conversion rates than some of those other channels, if we kind of get out of just relying on that code-based referral. Because that engagement, that brand recognition, it may not happen, like it may not convert right then. So even though that code is being displayed at the point in time, that customer may come back later. They're made aware of that really great bet or something like that. They forgot that there was an individual code that could have been used at that time. So we need to find really good ways to track the value that these influencers are providing earlier in the funnel. When we do that, and we have brands that do that successfully, and this is definitely for like the other agencies out there and affiliate managers out there. We recently had a brand that doubled their investment in content influencer partnerships because we were so much more focused on that discovery and not just conversion. The conversions will happen if the demand is sufficient. So the more we can kind of align performance and value to that, the better off we are. And that's it in a nutshell for us. Optimize towards contribution, not just conversion. And the strategy will kind of unfold itself from there. It'll make itself quite clear. So, okay, that's all sounds fine and good. It almost sounds obvious. And even the solution is going to sound a little obvious here, but the devil's definitely in the details for this. Real performance strategy means rewarding incrementality, not interception. So there's a few steps you can take towards that. And these are going to be a little broad seemingly, but there's some details in here that make them harder to do and require a certain perspective and maybe even using different technology than you're used to. So the first step is going to be reducing commissions to low value partners. But you've got to find a way to figure out who's low value and who's not. We use our own technology. You don't have to. You can use any other technology. You have a lot of other data sources, but you've got to find a way to quantify intelligently who's adding lift and who's not, who's driving demand and who's not driving demand. Too often we find that, and because brands may be lacking this data, they're going to use some subjective categorizations of publishers as a proxy for high value or low value. So they're going to just paint a broad brush and say, well, coupon loyalty, low value, content, high value. But the data doesn't always back that up. So you need to have a system to be able to quantify what is low and what is high value really reliably and really consistently. So you've got to build that out. From there, you can start shifting those commissions. So shift the incentives essentially towards those publishers that you've identified that are driving true growth. And you can do that a number of ways. You can do it on a performance basis. You can do that in flat fees. You can do that in co-pitching and co-content and giveaways. All those, you have a lot of tools at your disposal, but shift your resources towards those publishers that are driving more of that demand. And then kind of set a dollar amount to the value they're providing. Just continue to quantify on a dollar basis what they're providing to you as a brand. And then step three is basically layer that transparency and control into the program. So if you're just using one-off workarounds and you're trying to do steps one and two here on a one-off basis, publisher by publisher, without actually changing broadly how you're measuring performance for all of your publishers, you're going to have a scaling problem with that. So you've got to be able to kind of standardize and use some smart technology out there to consistently measure and remeasure the performance that these publishers are providing for you. That performance being ideally growth, and then bake that into your ROAS. So as I mentioned before, if you're just using affiliate network tracked revenue as the numerator in your ROAS calculation, that's going to be a problem for this because when you're reinvesting in those upper funnel publishers, they may not show up there. So you've got to be using different data sources, um, ideally full funnel data sources to quantify the value of these partnerships. And that's what's going to separate good from great in all these scenarios. The good brands versus the great brands. The great brands are going to be the ones that have a really, really clear view of the impact and are not relying on comfortable assumptions and biases that aren't really backed by data. Um, so where do we go from there? A couple action steps we can kind of help with. Don't wait for that perfect data. Act on like directional truths. And I say this all the time. It's marketing data, right? Like we're not gonna prove it all perfectly all the time. I can definitely think of times when I bought something on a whim stupidly without any sort of like, you know, justifiable or trackable reason that I bought this thing. Um, you're never going to have perfect data, but you're going to be able to have really smart directional truths here that you can productively operate within and test within. So number one, run that attribution audit. Run that attribution audit, identify your top revenue driving partners and measure their lift using both internal and external data, but most importantly, full funnel data. So run that audit consistently. And if for some reason it's not working for you. I've seen this with a number of brands where they'll say like, oh, our internal analytics are a mess. We can't trust GA4, or they don't like GA4, which happens a lot. Um, and they kind of throw it all away and then just default to the status quo of just using affiliate network data, which is never going to be correct. It's never going to be what you need it to be to have a full kind of view of where the value is. So if the problem is your internal data source, like what is that problem, and reinvest in that and actively work to make that a stronger data source for you and a reliable one. Then once you got that in place, step two is going to be tag and tier your partners. You don't have to go, you don't have to boil the ocean on this and try and like tier your partners in way too many tiers. And I've personally made this mistake before where we've had like affiliate programs where we tried to segment our commissions and everything to such a narrow, granular degree that suddenly nobody can kind of keep track of it. And publishers don't know how to optimize within it. It's almost too complicated. We overshot it. But make sure your partners are tagged and tier them. Have a bunch of different tiers based on where the value is. So high value, high funnel, demand generators, consideration publishers, and then kind of continue to reshuffle that deck based on your continued attribution audit. And then lastly, you can start to shift that budget gradually. So you don't have to just go full send on it. You can test and learn. You're going to have to do a lot of testing in here, but at least you have a basis with the previous steps on which to determine like, okay, we shifted 20% to this one publisher because we determined they were high value. They're driving a lot of traffic. They weren't getting credit for that traffic. Now that we have optimized and reinvested in that publisher and are working with them in a different way, what happened? What changed? Did anything change? And begin to have more of a test and learn perspective, but based on a much smarter measurement of value. And that allows you to scale much more intelligently. Now that you've kind of have a much better, reliable a foundation to work with. So again, like that's so much easier said than done. And I guess it's easy for people like me that have been doing this for a long time and the great people at PartnerCentric who kind of live within this space. But if that seems too simple or seems unbelievably simple to you, you can definitely reach out. Also in the resources tab, you can see the link to partnercentric.com/emarketer. So for any qualified advertisers out there, if you're trying to figure out like, okay, you want a little more help on a tech action plan, what is the next step, reach out. We'll kind of work with you and get a lay of the land and see what would help. And we're happy to do so. What we really want in our perspective is for the channel to kind of grow and to flourish. And the more people that are aligned to what is and what isn't performance, in our opinion, the better.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that, Tom.
Sure.
I really liked what you said about not waiting around for perfect data. You gave the example yourself of sometimes it's hard to even know why you buy something, so it would be even harder for a marketer to understand
Yeah.
always. And just looking into instead like the directional truths, and even if you're not looking for that perfect data, you still want to do as well as possible to paint that full funnel picture.
Sure.
So one question that we have for you is that many brands rely on this network data, but it often lacks the depth that they're looking for. So what is some advice you have when it comes to building a more complete view of how a partner is contributing to that performance?
Yeah, I would say the step one is I try and default to using the affiliate network data as a source of truth for cost and not necessarily as a source of truth for value or performance. Underneath the data that you can get through there, there's a lot more of a story to be told. So what we find is it's helpful for obviously a source of truth for cost. Real dollars are going there, and like you can't really argue against that. But when you look at some internal data sources, full funnel data from Google Analytics, Adobe Analytics, or even platforms like Northbeam or something like that, even comparing the data sets will tell you things. So we found that a number of publishers will be really performing based on metrics in the affiliate network. But when we look at a great example is like I do this all the time with publishers. I'll look at the clicks that they're providing and the conversions that they're getting credit for and compare that to the sessions that they're driving to that site. And we've seen this especially for a number of toolbar publishers, some like remarketing publishers that have tags on site. We'll see that they are driving an inordinate amount of clicks or getting inordinate amount of conversions, getting credit for a lot of them, and making a lot of money with very, very few sessions, which to us means like they're not driving value. They're not driving fresh traffic to the site. They're obviously coming in. Those real clicks are happening, but they're happening during a session that came from somebody else,
Right.
another influencer, another channel, something, which to us means this isn't really a demand driver, but more of a demand harvester. We should either work with them to try and find a way, is there something else we can do? So a lot of these like loyalty toolbar publishers, they'll have newsletters you can get onto. They'll have different promotions that you can work with them on to get more of that demand, to kind of get more value out of them and not just use that mid-session cookie drop basically with them. Or if that's not really an option, then maybe you need to pay them commensurate to that value, which is going to be less. And that's okay. Like honestly, like if that's the value that they're providing, that they help push a conversion over the line and convince someone to buy because that extra 5% off increase that AOV and maybe increase that conversion rate from cart to purchase. Like, okay, there's certainly a story there, but it's not driving that demand. It's just kind of pushing it down a little bit.
Right. So instead of it's maybe not bad to have these lower funnel partners, but just recognizing that they are contributing something specific that isn't necessarily that full picture of what a consumer is doing.
Yeah, totally. And we're never arguing to not work with them because there is some value to be had there. But really what we want to do is we want to be able to shift budget and shift the dollars towards where the real value is, the real demand is being driven from. So we can keep them in there and maybe pay them again commensurate to their value, but then unlock a lot of those dollars and push them upstream so that we can increase our overall revenue. We've seen, boy, it really pains me when an advertiser is in the space and they're saying like we've seen our affiliate costs go up and up and up. We've seen the attributed revenue go up and up and up, but our business has not grown at all. And that is not great.
Yeah.
And we really don't ever want to see that. It's indicative of paying for more of what you're already going to get or likely going to get. And we need to optimize better.
Do you have any specific examples? I know you wanted to chat about like the card linked offer and
Mm,
CLO partners, and I know you mentioned the
yeah.
toolbar partners before, but anyone that kind of operates in this like black box that you were referring to and not having a lot of transparency, how brands can go about working with them.
Yeah, um, we definitely have like a knee-jerk reaction to anybody grading their own homework and getting paid for that too.
Totally.
It's like I don't trust it. And it's not to say they're operating um, you know, unethically. It just means that there's something there that isn't properly being tracked and attributed and being measured, and it's really hard to optimize towards that. Um, so with the CLO providers, especially, like we see a lot of them, so much that we had to build our own thing to kind of track and kind of break apart that black box a little bit. But when you have these publishers that have access to really great audiences, they have additional distribution, we know there's value there, but they operate independently in like a completely different tracking scenario. We had to find a way to break that open. So with like a CLO partner, you got to pull that data in from them and run through matching sequences. Are these are these customers that they're referring, are they actually new? CLO providers, the CLO partners will often say they're new because we haven't seen a charge on this card over the last year, but people have a lot of credit cards. People
Right.
cycle through credit cards. Happens all the time. I literally just did it the other day. I got cash back for something I was going to buy anyways, through my credit card, and I also got it through a browser extension. I double dipped because I knew I could.
Right.
And that's not great. It's not driving growth for that brand. In my case, that was a scheduled subscription. I was gonna buy that heartworm medication for my dog anyways. Like, I love my dog very
They can't
much.
take credit for
They
that.
can't take credit for that. But yeah, I know that they did. So you got to find a way to use that data and either find a technology partner or work with your analytics team or something like that to run through a consistent matching scenario. When it comes to I don't want to. I've talked about browser extensions quite a bit, but it's not just them. It's really anybody that's kind of interacting with a customer while they're already on site,
Mhm.
and that can be through tags that they have that you, as a brand, has worked with that publisher to install on their site. It can be through browser extensions. It can be through really anything else. Um, that data then also needs to find its way back into your systems. You have some control over those tags, so you can actually do some decent incrementality testing, which is pretty great. But you've got to find a way to get that data back into your systems to say, like, okay, we've seen these browser extensions, we've seen the number of conversions come through these browser extension, their kind of their vanity coupon codes, and kind of match that back and see like, okay, we saw this number of clicks, saw this number of conversions from them, and this number of redemptions for those codes. How valid are they? Are they driving growth, or are they just pushing things over the line? Were all those kind of codes discovered at that last minute? In which case, let's have a conversation with that partner about where else can we get these codes in front of these users' hands? Where else can we kind of drive new traffic? Um, with some of the ones like CTV is another one, operates outside of a lot of like the analytics that we see. Pull that in. So if they're going to give you a breakdown of all of the views, all the impressions on that CTV, insert that into your overall incrementality flow. So that's what we would do with our incrementality products. We'll try and find a way to insert all those kind of views in an overall click stream. It's like, okay, we did see that ad was the first time they ever saw this brand. That's super valuable, or we saw them much lower than they thought, or not at all, and we can't find a way to insert them either. Like, what's going on here? Why can't we track this back to actual conversions? And unfortunately, if you don't do that, it's going to lead to either one of two things. Either you're going to spend a lot on these partners and you have a murky view on what they're doing for you. So you're constantly going to be questioning it, um, and likely not really growing your business with those marketing dollars, or you're just not going to work with them either. So you're abandoning access to a really great audience because you don't have a way to quantify the value. Um, Also not great, you're not able to grow your business. So we kind of want to thread that needle and be able to quantify the value, but then also still have access to those partners.
So let's say you're a brand that is actually recognizing that you fell into some of these traps with your partners and weren't necessarily attributing sales to the right people, and you're really looking to restructure your commission tiers. What would you say the role, anything you haven't mentioned about incrementality and kind of that data in making the shift feel strategic and maybe less risky for marketers?
Yeah, so as I said before, like always base it back, always based on data. So incrementality, certainly it's helpful to have like an IROAS number. Like here's your incremental return on ad spend. Super great to have. But there's probably more to uncover there. So we'll often, again, I'm kind of cribbing off a lot of our own tech here, but anybody can do this with with other tools as well. We'll often look for which of these publishers are driving earlier funnel versus mid funnel versus later funnel. Where are they sitting? Do they sit higher in the funnel? For some reason, are they very prevalent in the funnel? They have multiple touch points. Does someone kind of go back over and over again to reread a review or check for just the right price point or something like that? That can help you kind of figure out more of what's behind that incremental ROAS number. Definitely newer return customer acquisition. When we're looking at that customer acquisition costs and especially like the retention numbers, certain publishers may be like incremental based on that initial conversion. But what if those customers lapse? They never come back, or they don't, if it's a subscription service, they don't renew. How can we make sure that we are focusing on publishers that drive new customers incrementally, and then also those customers are valuable and stick around for a long time? That's also really important to have. Um, and then we'll also try and quantify more of like how that publisher helps that customer kind of make that decision. So you can uncover a lot of that through the behaviorism of when they drive sessions, how close the sessions are together. Are they really close together? Is someone really in a consideration cycle? Or did they go away for 6 months and maybe that publisher brought them back in? That's not high funnel necessarily, but it did drive that demand. Try and find a way to uncover more of what that story is going to be telling you. So, like, probably overcomplicated the answer to that question, but it's more like definitely get like an incremental ROAS number. Definitely use like full funnel data to do that, but then data tells stories for how these publishers are driving traffic, driving demand. Use that data, especially knowing what you know about that publisher. Some publishers like, and this is actually a great example of a publisher that on its surface with some incrementality measurements looks bad, like a retargeting publisher that actually exists just to recapture publishers that were there.
Mm.
They may not show up positively, but if you understand how they work, okay, they can kind of skew and you can handicap them a bit more one way or the other to get value from that partner.
For the brands that are kind of like newer to this conversation and are really looking to, for the first time, audit their affiliate programs, is there one like type of data point that you think they should really focus on? I think you gave a really good example before about it was page views or sessions
Sessions.
versus
Yeah.
actual like sales.
Like that would actually be it.
Yeah,
It's
that's
always the
it.
session.
Okay.
And it tells you so much more than I think, sessions were one of those things that, especially those that have been living in GA or Adobe or Telium or something like that for a long time, it's kind of second nature. Like they're always using sessions to determine like, okay, how many new sessions did we get from this channel, from this user? But the affiliate space, affiliate managers have not been using that term for a long time. It's always been clicks, 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 clicks. But
Mm.
there can be 10 clicks in a session, and that's not necessarily valuable. That customer is clearly has some demand. They're there. They're trying to find maybe that last 5% off or something like that. Um, so we found the most like the initial pass for value can really be uncovered with that session data.
Right.
for all of these partners. How many sessions do they drive? How many conversions do they get credit for? How many clicks are they driving as well? And that'll tell you so much about that publisher.
Yeah, it kind of seems like something that's like relatively basic, but maybe people are
Way overlooking it.
overthinking it or trying to go deeper than they need to be going like
Totally.
initially.
And then one of the biggest challenges that a lot of the brands that have been using like GA4 recently have had, especially if they've been using GA4 on not on a last click basis. They're using that data-driven model which blends things. So they try and get back to a last click. And they look at data that there's a report in there that will just kind of show you the driver of the session that converted. And that for a lot of publishers won't make them look very good because they don't come in that last session. But that'll also tell you like that report is off the rack. It's the traffic acquisition report. It'll tell you like these are the publishers that are driving sessions that convert. Um, and then everything outside of that is going to be mid-session. So that data is very prevalent, it's very available. It doesn't always make some publishers look good. And I think it's because of that, a lot of affiliate marketers have shied away from that view because they're kind of avoiding the truth in a way.
Yikes.
Like yikes, like total yikes. But like you're never going to get the true growth. You're never going to be able to kind of quantify it and drive the business forward unless you're like recognizing that fact.
Totally.
Yeah.
So would you say, this is a question from another question from the audience, is it fair to say that the first step towards understanding performance of affiliate as a channel is measurement at the partner level?
Yeah. Um, a lot of affiliate marketers that have been doing this for a long time, they'll always say that, or often say that affiliate marketing isn't its own channel. It's every channel,
Mhm.
just with a certain compensation model or certain performance model. And it totally is. There are paid search publishers, there are email publishers, there influencers, a huge body of influencers in there. Um, those are all like affiliates, but it's more about the model of compensation and how you're kind of paying for that performance. So the first step is make sure you're tracking each of those individual publishers very specifically um, and integrating them. And I try and elevate them, not having like the hierarchy traditionally is you're going to have like your medium, your source, your campaign, and your source may be like your affiliate network. And then it also may be like Google, and then maybe like Meta or Facebook or something like that. And then affiliates are down below on the campaign level next to a certain ad in on Facebook. But it doesn't make sense. It's kind of apples and oranges.
Right.
So I try and push that up a little bit, or even if you're not tracking it like that, you at least measure it like that. So we can measure like compared to Facebook, how does this publisher perform? Are they incremental compared to meta ads? Can we use the same incrementality measurements, which we do a lot of now, that we use on a publisher by publisher basis, actually for meta campaigns, for paid search campaigns? What's that going to tell us about those as well? So you've got to kind of stop treating affiliates as like one big monolithic channel because it definitely is not that.
Right. Integrating it into more channels, and you said comparing it to Facebook, for
Sure,
example.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like compare it to Facebook, compare it to your MailChimp campaign, something like that, because you're going to have an email publisher and you can have your internal email campaigns. Like you should compare those two things together. It doesn't make sense to hide it behind the overall affiliate umbrella.
Totally. So we have time for one last question. This is interesting because we've been talking a lot about the quantitative qualities of affiliate partners. So how do you factor qualitative elements of partner relationships into evaluation?
Yeah, like that's always marketing, right? Like it's qualitative, it's quantitative. We're trying to quantify everything, but it's like economics. Everyone is inherently doing silly things all the time, and you can't always determine why they did what they did. So you've got to have a little bit of qualitative, like something there. Um, so with certain influencers, this is a great example where influencers will often come in because you'll see a piece of content that they generate, and you know it's really good content. You know, it's like high quality content, it's engaging, it positions you well, it's not coming off too salesy, like it's the good stuff. The vanity metrics you don't trust because that can all be gamed. Maybe the click data isn't that great. Can you kind of take this instinct that you know this is quality data and try and correlate it to a boost in sessions or traffic or something like that? And try and use both halves of those things intellectually to say, like, we like this type of content. This is good marketing, good advertising. It's good stuff, and back it up with a little bit of data. Or as the previous example I'd given with like a remarketing, retargeting publisher, like if the data doesn't make them look good on its surface, you may just want to not work with them anymore. But if you actually understand, like, okay, they operate in this very specific way, we expect them to not look good under this measurement umbrella. That's okay. Let's, find another way to measure that or still value them a bit differently and treat them
Hmm.
outside of that. And that's all, that's fine as long as you're still like using data in the first place, and quantifying that in some basis. It can be a different quantification.
Awesome. Well, I think that's all we have for today, but thank you so much for joining us in the studio.
Thanks for having
We
me.
loved having you. Um, so And thank you, everyone in the audience, for answering our questions. We really appreciate it. Before we wrap up, let me take a moment to tell you about eMarketer's media channels. You can visit eMarketer.com to register for upcoming analyst and tech talk webinars and to sign up for our newsletters. Don't forget to check out our podcasts. We have Behind the Numbers, Reimagining Retail, and The Banking and Payments Show. Listen everywhere you find podcasts or watch on Spotify and eMarketer's YouTube channel. Keep an eye out on your email for the link to today's playback. And of course, feel free to contact us if you have any other questions. Thank you all for your time. And thanks again to Tom, the team at PartnerCentric, and our eMarketer studio team behind the scenes for making this webinar possible. We'll see you all at our next Tech Talk.